Hello and welcome to a new edition of Political Smackdown. I'm your host this week, Mike Philbeck. I have our two regulars on the Democratic side, Mr. Dedman and Ms. Wells, and Ronnie Whetstein, a recently retired Cleveland County Commissioner, is joining us. Ronnie, glad to have you in Wes's absence today. Well, it's happened again, and Andy, you and I remember when it happened two other times since we've been doing this show, and we had Mr. Dean Westmoreland here. I've never seen a Protestant get more into a Catholic Pope naming than Mr. Westmoreland did. Yeah. So I thought about him whenever the Pope passed away last week. But Pope Francis died on Easter Monday, very shortly after doing his final Mass on Easter Sunday and his final going out to greet the people there. He was the first pope from Latin America. His, I think, parents had immigrated to, was it Argentina? Mm-hmm. He's been pope since 2013. Actually, compared to Pope Benedict before him, and especially Pope John Paul II, who served a long time before Benedict, this pope has been considered probably the most liberal or progressive pope the Roman Catholic Church has seen, at least in modern times. At least he didn't get down to indulgences, Andy. He has appointed about 80% of the cardinals that will replace the pope. That's important because the question is, do they reflect his way of thinking or not? Time will tell in the next few weeks. In the southern United States where we live, while we have a fair number of people who consider themselves or are Roman Catholics, it's not dominant here, but in parts of the Northeast, certainly across Southern Europe, Central and South America, there are massive Roman Catholic populations. In fact, the Roman Catholic Church represents about 1.5 billion people worldwide in the broad realm of Christendom. So what are your thoughts about the time served by this Pope? And let's talk a little bit about the process and politics of doing the next Pope. Andy, you may have something to say since you were here with Dean and me the last two and remember some of the things he talked about, but what are you thinking?
Well, I just remember, Betsy, when he was teaching high school, they called Dean the Pope. That he was really very, very knowledgeable about the Catholic Church and especially the popes. I always thought it was funny, Dean. I said before we started, I really thought this Pope looked like Dean. he really had a strong resemblance to Dean. But a lot of people don't know we've got a pretty good sized Catholic Church here in Shelby. But you know, when you start thinking about this, and if you really want to see, excuse me, sort of how this works, go on Peacock and look at the movie Conclave. Mm-hmm. It is, except for the bomb going off and that sort of thing, it pretty much shows a lot of what goes on. It's probably the most political thing that you really see. And you know, let's face it, politics happens in church as much as it does in anything else. And there's a lot of that in this. You're going to see a lot of horse trading behind the scenes. You're going to see at how many rounds it might go. Back several hundred years ago, it went for several years before they could come to some kind of consensus. Most of the time, the longest in modern times it's gone is like 5 days. So it's going to be interesting to see. In most news shows, you'll see kind of who they think are kind of consensus. You've never seen a black pope. There could be some of those you don't know. There's one that's from Philippines that seems to be one that's kind of leading the pack at this point. So you really don't know. I mean, things, they are a-changing. So you really don't know. That's and somewhere in Africa there tends to be a more conservative strain of Catholicism than you will see.
That may be the hindrance to getting an African pope for the first time.
It could be because they very much are more a very conservative group of folks. So, but the one thing I think I would like to see, I think it would solve a lot of problems that they're having in the Catholic Church, is to allow priests and nuns to marry. Because I think that is where a lot of these pedophiles have been hiding. And that has been an ongoing problem that's been going on we know it's been going on for a long time in this century and the previous one, but probably it's been going on a lot longer than we know. This will be one place where they cannot hide if you've got married people in there that they just can't hide anymore. And I think this will go a long way to helping. I don't see any reason why every other offshoot of Christianity allows the leadership to marry, and I really don't see a reason why this can't happen.
And if Peter was the first pope, Peter was married.
And up until I think, what was it?
And I'm not saying Peter was the first pope, but that is a strain of belief in Roman Catholic history.
But they were being married up until, what, 13th century, 14th, somewhere along. I'm a little fuzzy, but they're also, I think, in the Greek Orthodox part of Catholicism, they do allow a priest to marry, but that stops their progression up the ladder at that point. So we'll just have to see.
Well, you know, it does have a process. The Pope's death has to be confirmed by someone there in the Vatican. Then the locks on the apartment where the Pope lives or resides are locked. The locks are locked. In olden days, they thought they needed to protect it because people would steal stuff to sell it for a lot of money. And so that became a tradition. And burial has to occur generally within 5 days. And I think he's being buried Saturday as we tape on Friday. And then the conclave of all the cardinals under the age of 80 are invited to help make the process to select the next pope. And they have an age limit. You have to be a cardinal under 80.
Under 80.
And that didn't change till 72.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, of course, they'll finally have the election and announce that smoke will come out of the Sistine Chapel, and it'll be chemicals that make white smoke when they choose someone and black smoke when they don't. And that's sort of the general process. Well, Ronnie, I know you're not probably like me, a scholar on the Catholic Church, but it is a big deal when this happens.
But you know, the things that Andy was talking about being political in the church, that is true in everyday life. Even a small business like the one I had all these years, there's always somebody behind the scenes trying to scheme and connive to change things. So there's politics in everything we do, and we just got to accept it. If everybody would do right, and that's a misnomer, because what I think's right and what you think's right is never the same thing. So we just got to continue working with that. One of the things that impressed me about the Pope is you seem to see him out amongst the everyday people more. Sometimes these guys get elevated and you only see them when they have real important things and they're standing up in front of the whole crowd doing mass or whatever. But he seemed to be involved in those, whether you agree with him being liberal or conservative or how you choose to say he was.
Well, what we're really talking about is he's the first pope to be more permissive on things like homosexuality and gay marriage and transgenderism.
Well, he said that the shepherd should smell like his sheep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with that.
All right, Betsy, what are your thoughts on the death of the Pope?
Well, having taught at the high school in Kings Mountain all the years with Dean Westmoreland, and the students affectionately called him Pope because he taught world history all those years. And Dean, if he'd have been here and had been able, he would have been in line right now to go in through and view the body. He just loved the Catholic faith, and my husband was a practicing Catholic in his college years, and so when we did our motorcycle trip to Europe and flew our motorcycle over and camped in our early years of our marriage, in my skinny days, we went to Rome. And it is so impressive to go to the Vatican and be out there in St. Peter's. And we were in the church, and it's like a huge museum. And we got up with some nuns from Chicago, and they were telling us about all the different displays. And it just so happened that the time was open that you could go down in underneath the altar where the popes were buried. And so we went down there, and they had the older popes, but Pope John the 23rd, who did a lot about modernizing the Catholic faith, having the language of the country. All these pictures were being taken by these tourists at his graveside. And I thought, oh, how terrible, how disrespectful. And we went on up, and I noticed 2 of the nuns is missing, and they were back there taking pictures of the grave on Pope John's 23rd. But the Sistine Chapel, where the cardinals meet, is beautiful. And it's a procedure. They have, like they destroy his seal and his fisherman's ring, so no one could use it. And it's just interesting to see. Of course, like Ronnie said, Pope Francis was the people's pope. He's not even going to be buried there at St. Peter's. He's going to be buried in another basilica in Rome, closer to the people. So, but he did put more women in charge of things, but he stopped short of allowing them to be ordained as priests. And we'll just see what comes out. Some want to follow in his footsteps. Some cardinals want it to go back to the middle. Andy, I agree with you. I think they should allow them, priests and the nuns, to marry, but I don't know if that'll ever happen.
All right, well, it'll be interesting to watch over the next week or 10 days after we tape this to see how that all works out. Perhaps when we get a new pope, we may talk about the new pope and what it means for the Roman Catholic Church initially. I think we'll take a break just a minute or 2 early so we don't just barely start the next subject, and we'll be back, and we're going to talk about the 3-judge panel's decision on election boards in North Carolina.
Probably not. I have to study for my exams next week, and my dad would kill me.
I can't make it. I've got a big game tomorrow night. I want to make sure I'm in good shape.
No, I'm good. I don't want to get in trouble. My parents would kill me.
Nah, I gotta fill out scholarship applications.
Everyone has at least one good reason to stay away from drugs and alcohol. Find your reason today and get back to enjoying life.
Hello and welcome back to the second half of Political Smackdown. A 3-judge panel, I believe on Wednesday, before we're taping on Friday, ruled for Governor Stein and against the General Assembly and the auditor, who is an intervener, on the bill to change the Board of Elections control at the state and local level from the governor completely to the state auditor. It was not a unanimous ruling. It was 2-1. One Republican judge and one Democratic judge voted with Stein. The dissenting vote was, of course, was a Republican. I got that wrong in my notes. It was a summary judgment, which means that's the final word from the court, this court. It was not a temporary restraining order. So from here, it has to be appealed, presumably to the Court of Appeals, unless they ask the Supreme Court of North Carolina to take it, and they do, but normally it would go to the appeals court next. The 2 who sided with Stein cited previous North Carolina Supreme Court rulings, specifically what they call Cooper 1 from 2018, when the Supreme Court ruled against a different version that the Republicans tried to take control, but they were moving it to the legislative branch. This time it stayed within the executive branch. One of the judges didn't see it that way this time, and so he dissented. He said because it stayed in the executive branch, he thought it should have been fine legally. So we know the appeal's coming. So the question, I guess, is, will the state Supreme Court, who ultimately will have to decide this, will they agree with this original 3-judge panel? Is there a difference this time because of the fact that it stays in the executive branch and may be reversed? Well, Betsy, I'm sure you have an opinion, so get us started.
I do. I do, excuse me. The Republican lawmakers violated the Constitution in an effort to strip election powers from the governor. As soon as the governor was elected, you had, and you know, to the auditor. Now, what does the auditor have to do with elections? And it's in the Constitution. And you know, how much power do the Republican Party, do you just want total control of everything at the General Assembly?
Yes.
I guess.
An honest answer.
An honest answer. No, I just think that according to the Constitution, that the governor has the power to appoint the election people. But I just,
The
when it goes
Constitution
to
doesn't give him that power. Statutes give him that
statutes,
power.
and I just wonder how down the road it'll go before the state Supreme Court, and after what they voted on with the Griffin-Riggs issue recently,
We'll
I
come to
think
that.
they'll be more partisan. I don't know what's going to happen at the state Supreme
Since
Court.
he's got that up, I'll go ahead and go second
Okay.
because I sent that. So this is what the Constitution that they quote in this ruling, which I read more or less. They quote the Constitution in Article 3, Section 5, Paragraph 4 as the reason. They say that the Constitution, the two that wrote for him, say that the Constitution says that the governor must reasonably be able to enforce the law, to have enough control over commission boards that they are primarily administrative. Now that's how they interpret that one sentence. The governor shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. In Article 3, Section 7, you see the auditor is one of the other elective officers, and their duties, which I've highlighted, their respective duties shall be prescribed by law. Who prescribes the law in North Carolina?
General
The
Assembly.
General Assembly. And the General Assembly has assigned this function to the executive. And the one judge who dissented pointed that out. And I think this is not an open and shut case. I think both sides have good arguments. And I don't think it's a done deal yet because of that, because it does stay within the executive branch, and I think they may have stretched a little, but it may not be. I'm not sure. But Andy, I was going to talk last, but since he went ahead and put that up, I didn't think to tell him to wait. I went ahead and explained why that was there.
And Andy, you've been down there. You've been exposed to all this.
I've been exposed to a lot of things down there. but
$100 bills?
no, I have not. Not that I would tell anyway. But my thing is this, Mike. We have always strived to have a balanced government between the legislative, executive, and the judicial. I feel like this is moving it more in favor, to me, the executive branch tends to be the governor, in my opinion. And I know a lot of other people see, you know, the other council of
The
states.
Constitution you just saw has all 10 council of states
Well,
in the executive
and I
branch,
understand that, but they have their other purviews that they administer.
as prescribed by law.
And I understand that. But does that mean that the auditor's going to look after insurance?
If that would be what the legislature told him to do, but we also have a commissioner of insurance.
Well,
that's
I
elected.
understand, but we also have a governor that looks after voting in this state
Nothing in
too.
the Constitution makes that happen. That's a law.
Well, I get that, but still it doesn't make sense. But I mean, this is way as being, as far back as I can remember, I think this is another power that's being stripped from the General Assembly, from the governor, for no other reason as party affiliation. That's it.
I don't think if we'd have had a Democratic auditor that would have been done. I'd agree with that.
Well, and that's not a good reason to change things. And I just feel like that this was something that was done for no good reason other than he was a Democrat. And
Well, if what the state board did to get us in the Griggs mess, the Griffin-Griggs mess doesn't convince you we need to change, what would?
well, that doesn't. But that was a foul up. It should have been fixed, and it wasn't. But that's another day, another fight. So, and hopefully that will be fixed. But by the same token, I still say this was wrong. It shouldn't have been done. And what they're trying to do is to make the governor a figurehead until a Republican get it again. And then if they're still in control, they're going to give all the power back to him.
I'm not sure when that's ever going to be.
Well, what what Mike said in jest is probably, it was just as true when for years the Democrats had control of the House, the governor, and the Senate. And I'm sure they did a lot of things to get things their way. Just like in 1972, they tried to exempt the Republican governor that was elected from being able to do things, and that failed in court. So we got to trust our judicial system to come up with the right answer. Now, what's the perfectly right answer? Everybody's going to interpret that different. But I think that that our state is in a position now that the balance of power seems to be swinging as the pendulum does from where it used to be mostly all Democrats in control for a long time. Now it's getting to be more and more Republican. Now, how long that will last, none of us know. But we have to deal with what we have.
Well, whether philosophically right or wrong, I don't really want to argue now, but whether constitutionally it's allowable, I still think is an open question, was my point.
Well, just to be show that I mean for everybody, I didn't think Jim Hunt should have had the veto. I mean, I just thought that was
And
just
what
too
you're
much
doing is
power.
illustrating what I almost interrupted you earlier to say, but I was polite for once.
Okay.
But I think in North Carolina, we've always wanted the legislative branch to be the strongest. We had the weakest governor in the country, and we were one of the last to let him have a veto.
Well, he really wasn't, because he had some of the most strongest appointed powers of any governor. I mean, it was very
Didn't particularly
wide.
matter when everybody was in the same party, Andy.
Well, still, I mean, if you had appointed powers and you could go all over, it had more than you think, Mike.
Well, let me tell you about one of the funny things about politics. The last name of the judge, who is a Republican, who voted to uphold it for Stein, is from Rockingham County. And Berger tried to get Cooper to appoint him to a Superior Court judge. And Cooper wouldn't do it. So Berger you remember those special judges the legislature created? Berger made this Wilson guy one of those, and he got assigned to this case by Newby and voted against Berger.
Well, I guess he
How
has
about
integrity.
That's just a little inside politics.
Well, there's
Andy.
always a bunch of special judges that come around.
Well, we'll see how that goes. I'm sure appeals will be filed maybe by the time some of you see this show, and it'll have another round. It'll probably be at least another month or two, won't it? But we do know there'll be no change on May 1, as would have happened without a ruling. The North Carolina House, this is just kind of one of those interesting things to me, has unanimously passed a bill, House Bill 432, called the Property Tax Relief Study. Andy, tell people why they could pass this bill unanimously, because it's just a study.
Yeah, it's just a study, and there's nothing really to it that anybody objects to.
So I think it's an interesting time because in the aftermath of COVID, we've had all this run up in real estate values.
Yeah.
And people are across the state, as revals come out, a lot of people are getting significant property tax increases.
Oh.
I love to hear a Democrat groan about taxes. So while there are some property tax relief programs in North Carolina for the elderly and disabled veterans, there are not a lot. And this is a study to see if there are more things that North Carolina can do to soften the burden on especially the elderly and the disabled and moderate income people in those categories. North Carolina actually has overall the 14th lowest property tax in the country. But let's remember that North Carolina also uses state income and sales taxes to pay for more of education than many states. In many states, the property tax locally pays the school teachers, and it doesn't
Right.
in North Carolina. But
I've always thought that was a strength in North Carolina.
the General Assembly will have to consider the impact on citizens as this study moves forward, but they're going to also have to remember that local governments have to have the means to provide services, and if you give too many property tax breaks, then, Andy, all you do is put it up a notch where it's a higher tax burden for those who are just above those thresholds.
Well, or you can do like Mecklenburg, they got a tax for everybody. They got a prepared meals tax. They got a rental car tax. I forget what, they got a tax for about anybody that wants one.
You got to get it from somewhere.
That's right.
And
And they're
that's
trying to
the
get
whole
it
case.
off the property tax.
But I've often said I think the property tax is about the worst tax that was ever devised because you never really own your real estate. In a sense, you don't really own your car, although you don't see people getting their cars taken away. Like I have seen a lot of people lose for not paying their taxes. You have too. I've been to many a tax foreclosure sale. But it is the system, and we just have to do the best we can. But Betsy, get us started. Do you think it's a good thing? Is it time to see if we can find a way to figure out another way to help pay for local government to lower property tax burdens?
I just think that somebody on this group that I must have talked to somebody to let them know about my dilemma on Dixon School Road below the new casino. And I'm interested to see if what will happen to the study. Will this study be one that will be pushed in the back, or will it be one that will be maybe have some laws? We'll see. And I hope that it'll help those of us that are having to pay more property
Quickly, Andy,
tax.
so we can get to the light.
Well, everybody feel really good about it, but nothing will really come of it because there's just nobody wants to do anything different on taxes.
There are a stack of studies how high.
Here's one of the things that I think we should talk about. And too many times we're all talking about whether to raise or lower taxes. But I just wonder, do we not need part of the Doge group to come to Cleveland County?
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
oh, I hate we got
I'm
this
going to pass
too
on
late
that one.
to
Lightning
talk
round
about.
quickly.
Last night, as we tape this, was the NFL draft. There was an interesting guy that was drafted by the Green Bay Packers. I thought it was interesting. He was dressed rather interesting, but it was funny when they interviewed him. He got to talking about his grandmother, and he started crying. She had lost her house a few years ago, and he said he was going to try to make things right. And I thought that was an interesting takeoff on it.
Ronnie?
Okay. I know this group is interested in legislative and different political stuff going on, and the Cleveland County Chamber has their legislative breakfast Monday, May the 5th. The Monday after some of you will be seeing this. And it's from 7:30 in the morning to 9:30. I've always enjoyed going to that. We have Representative Paul Scott, Representative Kelly Hastings, Senator Ted Alexander will be the speakers and give us legislative updates and maybe be considered a briefing of what's going on at the state level. And you will be able to ask questions.
Betsy?
The one thing that I attended this week, the town hall meeting that the constituents of District 14 brought about. And it was at LeGrand Center. Tim was there, but it was a cutout of him on cardboard. It was a nice picture of him, but it just wasn't a physical Tim. And there were people from all over the district, and the room was partially full. I thought over 100 and some people. And they talked about things like asking him to support public education and Medicaid, Medicare, protect Social Security, and get rid of Elon Musk and Doge. And then it was videotaped and it will be sent to Tim.
Well, that was fake news, but I want to talk about something else. Last night, the Pregnancy Resource Center of Cleveland County had its annual banquet, and I managed to get one of these cups called Defend Life. Little baby feet on it. That's a worthy organization. They do a lot of good work. They've helped hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the last 40 years avoid unwanted pregnancies becoming abortions. Kudos to those folks and what they do for Cleveland County. Come back and join us again next week on Political Smackdown.